Hey guys, it's the Gold Dang Bros here. We got a special guest up top, but here we got Tiger over here as usual. We got Troy over here, and our special guest, 2010 EUIC Champion Michael Pramawat. Um, we're
Hi.
bringing we're bringing you guys our weekly podcast. Like I said, adding in our extra guest. We're going to talk about some things during the week, meta talk like usual, ATL plays for Atlanta. But also, we got some other fun topics we're going to talk to you about. But first things first, let's give Michael a chance to introduce himself. Super glad to have you, Mike.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Just to kind of give a quick rundown on what I've done as a player and then what I'm kind of doing right now. As a player, I've made worlds many times. I have reached the finals of the World Championships in 2010. I got third place in 2023, and then I have also won EUIC in 2017. Quite the resume. I have also won a bunch of regionals, but have been recently overtaken. So I used to have the all-time record for North American regionals, but that obviously the records are made to be broken. So it is what it is.
Yeah,
100%.
yeah. So, like you said, most recently, player turned judge. That's what I've
Yeah.
been calling this episode. Definitely going to title that in there somewhere. I've had the joy to work with you in Vancouver. We were both assistant head judges. You got to be on the stream lead, whereas I got to do pretty much all the way up to the top four, and it was an amazing opportunity. I know I saw some crazy stuff in that top four match. Was there anything you saw crazy? I know there's some things we can't talk about. I get that, but like generally, what'd you see this event?
I saw overall like the gameplay was very good from the players. The In terms of how the stream went, actually the stream was very painless, which is a rare occasion for us. But you know, I think everything on the stream side went great, and yeah, when I they put me up there just because I think I have familiarity with it. But
I do agree with that.
from coincidentally both sides of the table, I've been on the player side and I've been on now the judge side, and so I kind of know everything that I might be one of the few people who know everything that goes on from both perspectives. Overall, Vancouver went very well for the stream side, and being AHJ was very cool because it was the first time I got to be the assistant head judge for an event, and it really opens up a lot of perspective on how events run, and then how you don't really get to see the whole picture when you're playing because you're really just zeroed in on your own individual event and maybe the people around you, but you don't really get to see how the event runs on a macro level.
Yeah, I can second that. This was also my first chance at running assistant head judge, and it definitely comes with its own size of challenges. From being a pretty seasoned floor judge for myself, over 10 events in 2 years, I was still sticking to the floor judge mentality instead of being the assistant head judge. Took a little time to switch that around, but once I was able to do that, I got to see my team grow, and that was probably one of my favorite parts is to see a lot of these younger judges where I was in their shoes just a couple years ago and see them blossom and do a lot better out on the floor. So it seems like we had similar experiences, that's for sure.
Yeah. My team also did that, where the team at round one was very different from the end of the event. So
Agreed.
very cool. It's also cool because that's another side that like players don't see is judges are also growing alongside the players in terms of like their experiences and how they improve their skills as judges, just like players are improving their skills as players. So
Yeah, and that's very true. I mean,
Agreed.
a judge is not just a rule book. A judge's growth and that personality. So it's an awesome point. I actually, of course, these two know, but I judged my first event down in the Puerto Rico event. I got pulled in at the last second. It's the BMK red shirt, but it was a huge learning opportunity for me, and I'm really grateful to do it. But man, it just the viewpoint from going from player to the judge side was massive.
oh yeah, it's a big system shock for sure. So yeah.
Gotcha. So now let's
Yeah.
hear from the player about it. So Tiger, you're our resident meta guy and everything going forward. So rotations ahead of us. Atlanta's up top. Buddy, you pick a topic. Let's run with it. What do you think's most important right now?
I think the biggest thing, like I was talking with Pramawat earlier about, is preparation for a rotation. Things that we need to look for. What would you generalize be the top 3 things that players need to know about a rotation?
The number one thing is the slate and the metagame has just been wiped, right? So like there's not going to be any established decks. You'll be very lucky if a deck actually survives rotation as is. And you have to be kind of wary on what their power level is, because a deck's power level is always contained within the metagame that it's getting played in, but the metagame is now non-existent. So that same power level might make it better or worse depending on what is going on with the rest of the decks. The big thing, though, is to focus more on making sure your deck functions. So consistency is a bigger focus on post-rotation decks. So yeah, I would focus on just making sure the deck operates and is powerful. Like basically, it's better to have a really strong hammer than to have a whole toolbox.
That makes a lot of sense. So, in that being perspective, things like Archaladon and Charizard, they're already basically set up archetypes that aren't losing a whole lot, and they do one thing really, really well.
Yeah, I mean those decks are strong into the next metagame. Another thing you can also do is you can look at a little bit of data, because Japan has been playing post rotation for a couple months now. And so you can kind of look at like Champions League. You can look at maybe their more local meta, because they're doing like their versions of League Cups over there right now. And so you can kind of look at what's going on over there. Obviously, you always have to take League Cup results with grains of salt, like you do here. But it kind of gives you a good idea of what's going on. The biggest thing is, for example, for like Champions League, the top 8 decks were a majority wall decks. But this is simply every time a wall deck does really well like that in terms of meta dominating, it's because the other deck list did not respect wall decks. And so you should look at that result with a grain of salt of, wall decks are good when no one is prepping for them, but they fall off very severely when people are. So
And
that kind
what
of
he
thing.
means by wall decks, things like the Farigiraf, the Cornerstone, the Mimikyu, Milotic, they all are immune to damage by certain types of Pokemon. So the walls decks that he was talking about were a Giraffe, Farigiraf, Milotic deck that are immune to basic EXs and Terra types. Is the top? There were 3 of them in the top of the Champions League that Tord went to, where he played the Terra Ogre box.
Yes.
And
And then obviously, if you could rip a good deck list, then you should try it with that.
And I
Right.
think we've already seen a lot of adjustment. I mean, at least in, not that we have a meta exactly yet, but what we're looking at a meta, you're seeing a lot more people testing with the Cornerstone and things like that you didn't see show up quite as much as you did, just because of that. Again, we've seen what happened in Japan, and people seem to already be adjusting, even though our meta doesn't exist yet.
Right, and but that's another thing, is people can get too lost in the sauce sometimes, when they're preparing for like phantom metagames that don't actually exist. So it's important to also make sure your deck is like consistently and just does like 1 or 2 things really well. Like if you look at like you can even look at like EUIC from like last year and the previous years. It's like a lot of the decks that are like super strong was like, for example, Tord's Charizard deck was really good. Just because he just made sure the deck just did the one thing. It got Charizard out with a Pidgeot, and it could draw cards with the barrel. And it was just a bunch of consistency cards with Charizard. So it is what it is, right? Like you just play a good strategy. Another deck that was also really strong in that metagame was Mew VMAX, because that deck has always historically been hyper consistent. And it does one thing. It gets out Mew VMAX and it attacks with Genesis attack. So
That it does.
yeah, so like simple strategies like that are usually very strong in the new metagame.
So
Now, is there anything that you are going to be missing personally rotating out of F-Lock?
Yeah, we just talked about this, didn't we?
In terms of personally missing, I'm actually kind of glad it's over. I did not enjoy the sword shield block that much. I thought it was like a very big power creep. I'm glad to see Greninja gone. That card was a menace.
That was
The
the one
Radiant?
I missed.
Yeah, Radiant Greninja. But I am sad to see Refinement Curlia be gone. I am a big Gardevoir enjoyer, so
Okay, that was not on any of our ones that we were sad or happy to see going. So, I mean, I'm glad to hear that somebody
Yeah.
is going to miss the Curlia. I think I missed Mirage Step when it left. So I
Yeah.
feel it.
yeah, I am a big Gardevoir enjoyer, but so I'm sad to see it go. But I am also like a Greninja hater, so I'm glad to see it go.
Man, I love
I mean, I guess
Greninja.
that
That
makes
was my
sense.
guy.
You want to set up Curlias. Greninja doesn't like Curlias. It makes sense.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's making me play this Manaphy card. I mean, like I'm gonna have to put in,
Dead bench phase.
I am actually very sad to see Manaphy go as well.
Okay, that makes sense.
Now, do you think the fact that we are losing Manaphy, but we're also losing a lot of bench snipers, is going to affect an influx of decks that can play cards like Wellspring?
I definitely think it will be played more because there's a very good timing that you can hit within the first couple turns to really run away with a game with things like Wellspring, things like Ends Duramatan. It's just like if you can take multiple prizes against a deck, then it's just very strong. Especially if you can cripple their setup at the same time. Things that'll combat that kind of gameplay is like TM Evo, Badoo. So you're either the opening strategy should just be either to slow your opponent down or to speed yourself up. So pick a lane.
Gotcha.
But I think those are both viable strategies. But I do think the Wellspring is a big concern, which is why the set after this one you'll see Shaman get released, which was
True. Shaman is a very important card coming out.
It
Is
will give you
Rapska
bench
Cope?
barrier. Is what Cope?
Yes. Is Rapska Cope, or is any deck playing TM Evo should have it?
I don't know. I think it's Cope right now, but I think it might be really good later because it's hard to say what the metagame is, right? Like for example, if Fusion or not Fusion, if Future Box becomes extremely powerful and people are just spamming Iron Hands, right? Like Rapska isn't really going to do much, but
Right.
if Wellspring runs over the metagame, then of course it's going to be great. So it really just depends. I think that's like a maybe a Milwaukee tech.
Gotcha. See what
but
happens in Atlanta and then adjust
yeah,
for it.
exactly, because it's kind of hard to say where the metagame is going to land. Because like, what if the metagame ends up being like an Arch Dura playfield, right?
Right.
Like you've wasted 2 spots, and now you're getting paired against Arch Duras that just like
All the
it
time.
doesn't do anything.
They don't care about your Rapska. Yep, 100%.
Yeah, that was one thing we were talking about is kind of like looking at Atlanta and Milwaukee as not. I mean, they're two separate regionals, don't get me wrong, but as we go into rotation, Atlanta's kind of got to be like trial and error. A lot of people are going to try things. Milwaukee's where they're going to clean those lists up. People are going to see things. Eyes are going to open. Oh, we should have played this card in this. That's kind of how we've been talking. Is that something how you feel as well?
Yeah. I mean, I definitely think. I think Atlanta will be more fun to watch, but I think Milwaukee will be definitely a much more technical metagame.
I agree.
That makes sense. All right, so we've talked to you a lot about this. The one last question about rotation specifically, is there a card you're excited for or think will be interesting mechanic-wise from judge perspective and player perspective coming in with this new set?
Ooh, for a card that is interesting from both perspectives, I have some cards that I like in general. So I think Hop's Double is really, really good, and we'll see a lot of play as the metagame develops. Just because having a gust effect on a Pokemon is just really good. Even if it's just
Yeah.
like you'll see some decks just like maybe try to loop it. You'll see some decks maybe try to just get a sneaky one of in there. And then maybe you'll see hop decks in general just be like good. But in terms of interesting cards as a player and judge, I think maybe the biggest one is always going to be I think it's going to be like the index. Also, it's just going to be like how they operate, and then like people not reading the cards.
A lot of that happened at pre-releases.
Yeah. So, and I think index give you the most. You have to read the cards.
Yeah.
So I think that archetype is probably going to give people the most headache, because there's a lot going on, right? Like you can only copy benched end Pokemon, right? You can only then there's like the stadium that gives like free retreat. There is like people are playing the I forget what the caps or the hourglass is called. Hourglass?
The Power Glass.
Hourglass.
Hourglass, yes, that was a secret tech from Puerto Rico, Tiger. Remember that?
And so there's there's that flying around, and then there's of course the infamous ends up
PowerPoint up.
PowerPoint up. We've made it very clear we are going with PowerPoint up every single time that card is mentioned.
There's end PowerPoint up. So
I was going to say, you as judges are. We will be saying the other thing.
You go with the other one. I am saying
in fact,
PowerPoint
if
up.
I had to pick a controversial card across the board, it would just be that one.
Yes.
Just because of the name of it.
Caster's Nightmare.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they can just read the title of the card, and it is what it is.
Yep. So one thing that I have noticed that a lot of players have skipped over just in like the recent pre-releases that I assume will get better as time, but a lot of people looked at the Iono's Kilowattrel and read it like Reverum. But you actually have to discard it from the Pokemon. And we had so many people misplaying that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean that can happen. But it's like a lot of these like another card that has like a lot of like misunderstanding because they just simply haven't read the card is like Area Zero.
Right.
Yeah, like if
Of course,
you don't know,
I don't have a Terra.
It's like how it's or it's like who discards first? I don't know. Have you read the card yet?
Read the card.
My Terra got knocked out. Do I discard or promote first? Yeah, there's a lot of things that people just don't read cards.
Yeah. So like they kind of like skim cards and then go. They understand the essence of the card, but in terms of like the particulars, they go, I don't know how this card works. But if you just read the card, it tells you how the card works, even in the particulars. Because they've gotten much better at being clear on what the card effect is. And so I'm sure, like that card is obviously made. Kilowattrel is obviously made to be played with Billy Bolt.
Right.
But obviously, if you only skimmed the card and didn't actually fully read the card, then it can really just do whatever you think it does.
He said that was me.
I legit thought that it was just Lightning Reverum and was like, all right, cool. Here's the game.
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
So that's all I've got for specific rotation questions.
The next thing I have on my list to talk about is it's kind of hard to talk about is the ATL top 5. I mean, without a metagame, it's kind of hard to decide on what's up top. I know Tiger has been working a bunch of different decks. I've been trying to help where I can. Again, I'm a glass cannon. I'm better with Miraidons and other things. Thinking decks, sometimes I'm not the best practice with. It's okay. I'm fine with that. I will hold the cards. We'll work through it. But he's been practicing a lot of things. What are you most excited about, Pram, before we get into what he's been playing?
Yeah. I mean, so I think the deck that I've kind of latched onto the most is Arch Duraludon Double. I think that deck is really strong. Obviously, the biggest issue is Pikachu EX. Because the only elegant way of dealing with it is to use poison at the moment because there's no canceling cologne. There's no, but like you could poison them and then that'll work too. But the only way to really get
was talking about the one monkey, one dark, and playing Rigid Band.
Maybe.
Feels like a lot of pieces though.
Yeah. I mean, you only have 5 bench spots, so it's
Mhm.
like, 2 of them are Archduras. So like
Yeah.
you're active, and then you have maybe one on your bench. Those are, and then maybe a regular Duraludon is coming down, and so you only have like 3 to 4 bench spots to play with. One of them is probably going to be Pheasantipity at some point.
Yeah,
Mhm.
you need
So
it.
there's only so much space, especially if there's a double down.
Yeah,
Yeah,
5
so
spots is after people have been gotten used to playing with the new 8 again with the Area
Yeah.
0. 5 spots seems like a lot for some of these decks,
It
yeah,
does.
or not
exactly.
enough.
Yeah, so there's a lot of effects that you kind of want to have right now, and so I think that's the biggest contention is like, because there's so much you can do with all the different like basic and Terra Pokemon, but it's like, can you make a field that it like makes that is coherent and within the amount of space that you have? So
I was
So
making the joke
with
the other
that,
day with Tiger. He was working on a deck, and I looked at him and I'm like, I think you need about 10 bench spots at this point for what you're trying to do.
yeah, like I have like another deck that I'm kind of cooking up, but I haven't really
can't leak
really
it.
I actually, yeah, well, there's less incentive for me to like put ideas in the paper just
Yeah.
because like I'm going to be judging this season. But I've been kind of like toying around in my head with like a Charizard Monkey Dory deck. But
Okay,
I have
Charizard
no
Monkey Dory seems cool.
yeah, I mean, like, I have no idea if this deck is good or not, but it's just been like kind of floating in my head. I was like, oh, maybe it is good, maybe it's bad, I don't know, but it's cool.
Hey, you can do Charizard can do just about anything. That's
Yeah, we've
one of the
realized that.
things that I've been working. I've been cooking up with instead of like how the Terra box has the Grass Ogre Pawn as its engine, I'm using Charizard to fill all the colorless energies. Instead of the Teal Dance E-Switch package, I use Charizard.
Yeah, I mean, it's good. And like, to me, it's like Monkey Dory can really get put into anything that energy accelerates. So
Mhm.
like, that's why it was such a good fit in Gardevoir. In addition to Gardevoir doing self damage, but you
Right.
even saw this in EUIC with the Fernandez brothers playing Monkey Dory in their Dragapult deck.
Mhm.
It's and like it kind of just highlights how good Monkey Dory is in anything that even attempts to energy accelerate. And you can energy accelerate with Crispin, and it's just fine.
I was
So
just about to say Crispin is
yeah.
the new top 5 supporter probably
I
going
would
into this
say.
format. What would you call the differences between junior and master metas? And does that make a big difference when it comes to new formats?
Oh man, you're really making me throw some shade here.
Yes, we are. Yes, we are.
I'll put it more like but that I've noticed, it's more of a philosophy difference. So I would say the younger divisions, they pick decks that they're personally more comfortable with, whether they're good or bad in terms of the metagame. And they try to rely on their player skill to help them maneuver through the tournament. Whereas masters have come to a level of zen that like they are probably going to be equally as skilled or maybe less skilled than their
Yeah, just
opponents,
like, yeah.
and so they will make their deck choices based on data and what gives them the best chance given their player skill uh, of winning the event. So like that's why you see like Lugia, for example, has always been popping up and down because Lugia has a real nice floor of what's acceptable to like play the deck, and it's very powerful. Whereas like Lost Box stuck around in the younger divisions longer than it should have, just because it gives the player so much agency that like they can maneuver around their opponents in a more skillful fashion, even if the power level isn't as high as the other decks. And so it's more about what the player's trying to emphasize, or is the player trying to emphasize player skill, or are they trying to emphasize big data?
So let's
Yeah,
push this
Troy,
to our resident Pokedad on that one. Since he has a junior that was, I mean, raving about Lugia, finally got her top 8 with it. But I agree with everything Pram said up there. Troy, why don't you go ahead and give your 2 cents on that?
So I mean, it's dead on. She loved Lugia partially because it was powerful, partially because we came in during Silver Tempest, so it was the deck that she grew up on. And she had both of my girls absolutely love big, chonky, gonna do damage kind of decks, and that's definitely very true. So what we're trying to do right now is we're trying to push them towards a little more of the think smart, play the game better decks. That way, again, I've got Charlotte who's looking at seniors next year, and it's going to be a rude awakening for us in seniors. So we're trying to, play a little bit more towards that. Hey, we're going to learn how to actually play the game instead of just the deck carrying us most of the way, and really focusing on that. So my boys have a little bit of an advantage because they're younger and they're going to actually grow up in this game. We only started this like 2 years ago, so this is our second full time competitive season, and it's definitely a big growth area. But watching even, I think we mentioned it last week too. Look at the juniors meta for this year. Yeah, it's very, very diverse, but what's winning almost every regional is Guardy. And it's because it's the quality of decks carrying it, plus you've got the skill level of those players, whether it's, the Annabelle Ono or the Zelda Zhao or, whoever it is. It seems like Guardy's up there almost every time because by the time you add good deck and good player, big things happen.
Yeah, and that's what I was kind of talking about. Like, players will pick decks that are like, for example, Gardevoir is having good results in Masters, but it's not like crazy, right? Whereas, like, from what you're saying, Gardevoir is just crushing juniors, and it's because it puts an emphasis on the player skill, right? Whereas, like Masters, like, excluding the maybe top 50 players in the event, the skill is a um, much less reliable separator.
Mhm.
So it's more about like deck choice, the matchups that you hit. Like, well, while player skill matters as like as a baseline, more people are at that baseline in the Masters division than are in the younger divisions, simply because you're just older, right? Your brain is more
Yeah.
developed. Like, it is what it is.
Right. So what brought you into Pokemon originally, and what kept you around the whole time?
Well, I got in with the original fad, so I grew up watching the TV show. I got a Game
course.
Boy. I played the video game before I played cards. And then I eventually got my mom eventually bought me a theme deck, and I
Nice, good
remember,
old theme decks.
yeah, I remember reading the rule. I learned by reading the rule book. I just read the rule book and then was like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, you can play the game with this. And so I ended up going to local shops and kind of went from there. But I've been playing since the beginning, and then I forgot the second part of this question, but that is how I started playing.
What
What's
keeps you
kept
here?
you playing the game?
Oh, what keeps it right. Honestly, and this is kind of like a cheesy answer that I'm sure maybe other people have said this before, but the community is really really welcoming, and it's really fun to hang around. Like, when people like it's a little cheesy, but when you say the friends you made along the way, it really is kind
Is
of
the
true.
The journey together.
the
Yeah, another thing.
journey together?
Yeah, well, another thing is I genuinely enjoy how the game plays. So like, like I can still be friends with people and not play Pokemon, and it's fine, right?
Yeah.
But the game is also, it kind of tickles the right itch in my brain, where it's the right amount of problem solving with the uniqueness of, like, most games are very different in terms of, like, at least the beginning. Like, the end game you can usually like map out to get to a very similar end game, but it's just a very skillful game, and it rewards a lot of different skill sets, which I enjoy. But and I think that's kind of true for a lot of players, especially when they reach a super high level, is you get kind of obsessive about it, and and it's a good thing. It's a good outlet to channel that kind of energy, because it rewards a lot of things, like planning, math, just a ton of different things. Like, like, for example, at Pokemon at its highest level, is probability manipulation.
Mhm.
And so, can you calculate basically napkin math? Can you basically napkin math your deck odds and then use that to inform your decisions? So you need to know general macro level strategy, and then which way to go based off of your probabilities of hitting different things. So there's like a ton of different baseline level things that you need to know, and it kind of just scratches the right itch in my brain. So I really enjoy the game,
Awesome.
but it is also the friends you made along the way.
For those of you who aren't as statistically inclined as Mr. Pramawat is, what the short version of what he said is knowing when to use your knowns versus your unknowns when searching your deck to help win more efficiently.
Like calculating your unknowns, right? Like you have to like figure it out, and then it's also about playing the cards in the right order to maximize your chance. So like you can and one thing that and I'll really stress this as a point on getting better at the game. Very rarely will a game of Pokemon be perfectly played. So if you said you didn't make any mistakes, I got some news for you. That's probably not true. And even at the highest level, that is also not true for the most part. It's just what you consider a mistake is different. So I discarded the wrong Ultra card for Ultra Ball, and it bit me 6 turns later. I consider that a mistake.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
all because
And-
it's like I should have recognized I needed that card, or maybe I should have played around. There's like different maneuvers you can do to fix, like, get better. And so it's just about like just acknowledging you can always improve at the game, which is a really nice thing about the game as well.
100%. And that goes with the manipulating of finding the right statistics of hitting things. The phrase that every player knows, thinning is winning. So pulling out all the bad things to get to the right
Yes.
things is increasing your probability to get there.
Yes, but also knowing when to not do that is another thing.
Right. Over thinning
Yeah.
can hurt you later on.
We've
what he
been
said
talking about
throwing you
that.
underneath the way.
And
We've
that's
been
what I'm
talking
talking
about
about.
that.
Like,
So go ahead.
yeah,
Go
that's
ahead,
what I'm talking
Bram.
about. It's more about like a macro in terms of like overall game plan. You have to know which way you're gonna go, right? And like so you need to know that before you should even figure out the like the minute probability stuff. But
Mhm.
you have to know the game at a fundamental level, and then you can kind of optimize that with figuring out your odds.
Agreed.
All right. And for the last personal question for you, who is your favorite Pokemon and what is your favorite card you've ever used?
My favorite Pokemon is Zapdos.
Okay.
Um,
151, I
and,
like it.
and I really also like the Galarian Zapdos. I love that it's a Roadrunner.
Nice. It
Um,
is.
It's a Roadrunner that has big chicken legs.
I never
The
thought of
king of
it as a
chicken.
Roadrunner. That's gonna stick with me now, Pram. Thanks for that one.
And I also like the fact that the Galarian version, shiny versions, are the OG colors.
Yes.
So there's a lot of things I like about the Galarian version of Zapdos and Zapdos himself. But in terms of my favorite card I've played, wow, okay. I mean, I have a long list of cards that I really
Yeah,
enjoy.
you did
but,
probably, yeah.
my favorite card has to be Seismitoad EX.
Okay. Okay.
Um,
A little toxic over there.
it is. But the because one of my favorite decks that I've played is Toad Bats, and so
You
just
want to
being
give
able.
people a little rundown of what that deck did?
Yeah, sure. So and this card is going to age me a little bit, but what Seismitoad EX did for 2 colorless energies, it did 30 damage, and it prevented your opponent from playing item cards. To put it in perspective, a normal EX Pokemon would have 180 HP, so you were 6-shotting things. But you also had Muscle Band, which increased your damage by 20. So it went from 6 shots to 4 shots. And then Crobat and Golbat would put down damage counters when you evolve them, and you could manipulate that stuff with another card called Hypnotoxic Laser, And so you were it was basically an item lock deck that had a lot of damage modifiers to ramp up the clock on item lock. But what was interesting was there was a lot of counterplay to the deck in terms of like what you could do, especially as like it went into expanded and then increased from there. But Seismitoad EX is definitely my my all-time favorite card because I enjoy the control decks, but I like it when it's an active control rather than a passive sit and wait strategy. So I like being proactive about the game.
So, and that's the version of Seismitoad EX versus something like Block Snorlax. Both are
Yes,
control aspects. One's active, one's reactive.
yes. I like to be I like to be in control of my own destiny, kind of thing.
That makes sense.
Rather like I'm not trying to decklist check people. I am trying to have a strong strategy and implement it.
All right, cool.
Yeah, hearing that laser, actually, we had some GLC practice. I'm getting ready to go up to the 1K for the GLC, and I got lasered today by a toxic deck. It was fun. I got through it with my grass titans, but yeah, hearing that laser, yeah, that was definitely brings you back.
Yeah, oh yeah, it was very funny. There was an expanded tournament I played in where I had laser in my deck, and this is before COVID. But my opponent, like laser, is such a famous card for people who played during that era that everyone knew what it did. Right? It's kind of like knowing. It's kind of like knowing what Poffin does, or like
Yeah, for a new player, yeah, it makes sense.
So one of those things, right? Like it's just a staple in everything. Or TM Evo, like it's like everyone knows what TM Evo does. But yeah, I played Laser down, and then because Expanded is such a legacy format, my opponent didn't know what Laser did, and they were like, "Let me, what is this blue card?" And then I was like, "Oh no, you're about to learn what
You were learning today.
and I'll tell you guys what Laser does for anyone who actually doesn't know this, because at this point, there's not many expanded tournaments that are
No, there
popular
isn't.
anymore. So what Laser did is an item card. It has a blue border, but it's an item card, and it poisons your opponent's active Pokemon. However, the better effect of this card is it also lets you flip a coin. If heads, your opponent is now asleep. So it gives you 2 status effects potentially on a coin flip, and it's because it's an item, you can play as many lasers as you need to try and make them go to sleep. And in combination with an item lock, so if you put them to sleep and then you item lock them, there was very few ways they could get out of the active spot. They would have to use a supporter or a ability, and typically with Seismitoad, you had ways to shut that down. So it is what it is. What it is. But yeah, I mean, like that deck was really fun for me, and there are some stream games of me playing that deck if you want to dig it up.
We'll have
Go
to
see how
attach
it
some
works
of
and
those.
whatnot.
Yeah.
That we'll have to look at those and see if maybe we can get that added into the link of some of the these random cards so people can find them themselves.
Yeah.
Do you think Hypnotoxic Laser would be a useful card in current format?
Hypnotoxic Laser would be a useful card in any format ever printed. This card is bonkers. To me, it is a top 5 item card of all time. Just because of how, I mean, like unless they change how sleep works, then
Yeah, it's just bro.
it is at this point just crazy, because
Yeah.
it's basically giving you a free attack with an item card. So it's almost like you got to attack twice.
That makes sense. Right.
So,
You guys have anything else to add before we go into Atlanta?
yeah, I was gonna say.
I was going to say, I'll throw one in. I was thinking about this earlier. So this is our 3rd rotation. This is, of the 3, this is the biggest rotation we've been through. So Pram, what about you? What is the biggest rotation you've seen in your time where you go, man, looking back at it, that was rough?
Okay, I like that.
I actually have an answer for this one. That is actually like very crazy. You might you guys might not know about this, but back in 2011 there was a emergency rotation.
Maybe I don't.
it's a little bit of a history lesson, but the way it worked, what happened was I believe it was the black-white set had just been released, and along with this release, there was a rule change that changed how all the cards, or it changed the first turn rules, and the issue was that you could for the first turn rules, and it was you could just do whatever you want. You could attack, attach energy, play supporters, no restrictions. However, in the previous block, there was a card called Sable. There was a Sableye card that had the ability, if you start with this card, you go first. And so the metagame warped into for like locals. This was like during like the equivalent of what would be league challenges. The league challenge metagame had devolved into everyone playing for Sableye to try and go first. To try and turn one KO or board block your opponent, because the card pool was so large, and so there was a emergency rotation to rotate out a lot of those cards that were doing that.
I did not know about that. I knew about the save line wanting to go first and whatnot.
I
did not know
remember
we had an
seeing it.
emergency rotation.
Yep. Because usually it would rotate after Worlds. But this was the time where it rotated before U.S. Nationals, which would be the equivalent of NAIC.
So is that why we now have rotation? It's in a weird spot this year. Well, it's about the same time, but it was right before EUIC for the past X amount of years, because that's the time frame it hit.
That's what the time frame it hit. Around the time frame because it happened. The emergency rotation happened in May, but that's not. But after that one time, it reverted back to rotating after Worlds and sometimes a little before Worlds. I actually think it's just more an effort to bring the game in line to a global scale. And I don't have any any data points, or
of course,
this is all speculation. But I think it's more of a philosophy change to bring the game more on a global scale timetable than it is to like have Japan be playing this completely different format, and then Worlds comes around and they're playing they have to like play a completely different format that they've been playing all year, which is part of like why you don't see if you look at like past World Championships, like especially in the early ones, it was kind of very rare for Japan to do well. A lot of this is because they would have to completely abandon the game that they were playing and play a different version of the game that the rest of the world was playing. So they were at a severe disadvantage in terms of their preparation. But whereas like nowadays the game is more globalized, and so at worst they're one set ahead of us.
With that, you talking about the emergency change and because of that card and whatnot, that makes me think about the fact of when they did a ruling change on going first, where they took away going first ability to play support cards. There are people that don't know that we could play supporters turn one going first, and you explain that to people, and that's a big shocker. Do you think that had anything to do with any certain mechanic that was going on at that time frame?
No, I think it was just too powerful. Going first was just too powerful. Like usually with a well-balanced game, you want it to be generally you want the person to win the coin flip to go first, but you want it to be like a decision. It's like, oh, there should be some cases where you want to go second. Whereas it was just universally better to go first, and if you did not win the coin flip, womp womp.
Yeah.
And so I think nowadays this is probably one of the more balanced first turn rules, obviously, because we haven't even changed it in forever.
Right.
So and I think this is probably the most balanced the first turn rules have ever been. And yeah, I think it's great right now. Just because playing a supporter turn one going first is so powerful, because not only do you get to evolve first, you get the first energy attach, and now if your deck is running on all cylinders before your opponent has even done anything, like it can get out of control really quickly.
Yeah, steamroll.
Yeah.
All right.
What is it? One of the most important rule changes. It's probably not actually most important, but one of the most interesting rule changes that they've done in recent years is the fact that the game knows what format it's in. And for those of you who don't understand that statement, is that
Yeah.
so like if you're in GLC,
Mhm.
they play Brooklet Hill. You can search for a basic water or fighting Pokemon. In that format, the cards know what they're in. They're playing a lightning deck. They're not
You
allowed to
can't
use
search.
that card because the game knows that it has no physical fighting or water Pokemon in the deck.
Mm-hmm.
So
Turfield in my
that might be
GLC
for
is
some of
pretty
the
safe.
judges out there who already know that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you're not news to me, but yeah.
All right. So, what about you, Troy? You got any food for thought ready for this episode? Because I think we're about at our time. I don't want to keep anybody too much late. I feel like we covered quite a bit of good topics here.
Yeah, I mean, really for me here, it's just going to be just reiterating something Michael said earlier. We'll stick with that food theme for Poke Snack Dad, but don't get lost in the sauce. Again, we're pre-meta, we're
Get Lawson's.
pre-everything, and it's so easy for us to sit there. And again, I'm king of overthinking everything. Tiger, I'm sorry for that, but you know, don't look too far ahead. Again, especially kids meta, find something comfortable, find something that's well played, that's going to hit decent into the meta, and let the kids be comfortable and have fun. They'll do better than if you tried overcooking it. That was my first season. We just way overcooked and it tanked. So play something smart, play something fun. Sauce is good, stay out of the sauce.
Don't get lost in the sauce. I love it. All right. And again, guys, I think that's it. Pram, I want to thank you for sitting in with us and chatting with the bros. We really appreciate it. Any final thoughts from you?
No, I mean, I hope everyone going to Atlanta will have a great time with the new format. It'll be very fun to watch what everyone kind of cooks up. Like, I have my ideas of what's good, but you know, I've always been surprised by what people bring. So I think it'll be very, very cool to see what people have cooked up for Atlanta. But I would urge people to keep it simple on what you're cooking,
Mm-hmm.
because you don't know what everyone else is doing. So I mean, like, you
You
may
know what's
think you know, but you don't truly know. So unless you've kind of gotten like a read on what the room is doing, just keep it simple.
yeah.
So yeah.
So you don't know what everybody else is doing in their kitchen, essentially.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, right? Like, so just don't get too lost in the sauce and have fun out there.
All right, Tiger. Why don't
Michael,
you
you
go ahead
want
and
to send
sign
us
us
off this
off?
time?
Well, I was going to give it to
Oh,
Tiger. I
I was
guess
giving it.
if you want to pass it
Okay.
off, bud, you go ahead. It's up to you.
I'll go ahead and pass it off. Troy hasn't done too much this time, so
Okay,
we'll
that's
let him
fine.
send us off.
Mostly, guys, thanks for coming out. Michael, huge thank you for coming out, joining us this week. But guys, have a great one out there. Thank you, guys. We'll catch you later.
Stay lucky.